Welcome back to another episode of Too Good to Be True. I'm your host, Drew J. Davis, and I just want to let you guys know you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with Drew D, and I appreciate you for that. Just stealing a quick line from one of my favorite rappers, Jay Z, one of the best to do it, one of the Mongols in the industry. But I want to get into it today. We're going to be discussing Men's Health Month, otherwise known as also Men's Mental Health Month. As we're in the month of June, we're smack dab in the middle of it. And on Wednesdays, I like to identify Wednesdays for myself as Wellness Wednesday. And that's one thing I push out to all my clients and my fans, and the people that listen to this podcast are going to get to know that really well now. On a Wednesday, I usually hop on IG Live or just hop on something and talk to people. But while I'm doing that, I'm usually doing something and showing ways to people that I decompress, which might be coloring in a coloring book. One of those things I was taught by my mentor to do as we had conversations on Zoom or Skype. Geez, that's so long ago. As we have conversations on those, and it made it a little bit less formal, where we're just both working on something mindlessly and able to continue a conversation. But as I talk about decompressing, we go through so much in our workday. And I experienced this as a professional athlete. I experienced this when I worked at UCLA as a director of player development, where you're dealing with so many other people. You're dealing with a lot of problems. You're solving a lot of things. You're critically thinking. You're taking on the brunt of a lot of other people's emotions and what they're going through and what they've been through. And once you get done with that day and you go home, some of that stuff sits with you. And so, how do you do something to mindlessly um, detach and mindlessly remove yourself from the world without sitting here and having to stew in these feelings? And so that's where I started to do more things like decompressing, whether it was reading, coloring, shining my shoes, that I found was really relaxing to me, listening to a vinyl record. Those are all things that I do to decompress. And I also try to find other ways to help other people decompress. And I've had clients where we start doing stuff like knitting or sewing, where we just do things like grounding ourselves, going out into their front or backyard, barefoot, standing there, and really taking in everything that they're getting from the environment. What do the trees look like? What does the sound like? Is it windy? How does the grass feel underneath your toes? Just things like that. So my challenge to everybody listening to this episode today is find a way that you decompress when you get done with your day. Because I know there are a lot of parents out there that listen to this. There are a lot of student athletes and young people. And besides jumping on that phone, which is a lot more stimulating, you'll hear me tell you a lot to get away from that phone. That phone, even though it provides us a lot of things, it doesn't help us disconnect from the world. And so if you're a parent, when you get off of work and sometimes you come home and it's right into the family life, how do you take 5 or 10 minutes to yourself to decompress, to reset, to get into a different mind state, to be able to be available for those other people in your life? June marks Men's Health Month, and it didn't always start out with a whole month. It started out as 1 week way back in 1994. And it started with that 1 week, but within a couple of years, it grew to expand to the month of June. And one big reason for that was because there's these studies and there are these things with people looking at the life expectancy of men. And they went through the deaths, they went through our morality rate compared to women and what that looks like. They went through it through different ethnicity groups and who ended up lasting the longest or living the longest. I shouldn't say lasting. That's really, really crude of me. Who's living the longest and who's also living the shortest. So doing my research when it comes to going and looking up stats and statistics and facts that I can come back and tell you guys that are reputable, I looked at the American Institute for Boys and Men, and they had a study that goes all the way back from 2001 to 2022, where they look at all the deaths and moralities of men and women and compare those and give us some very good statistics and stats to look at. As I looked at that, I found out that men live a lot shorter lives than women on average. And on average, men live 5 less years than women do, for whatever reason that might be. They think it is a real problem. It's an epidemic that we are not outlasting women. And this can be for many, many reasons, dating back to times way before 2001, even when you go into the 1950s or, 1920s, whatever it might be. But I got some statistics that I want to tell you guys that I think are very important that you guys can take out in the world and use in your arsenal and have as a knowledge base when you're talking about Men's Mental Health Month or Men's Health Month, and when you're talking about morality rates compared across different ethnicities. And so this study dating from 2001 to 2022, they have Asian men living to age 82, Asian women living to age 86, Hispanic males living to age 77 on average, and Hispanic women living to age 83, white men living to age 75, white women living to age 80, and you have black men living to age 69 and black women living to age 77. So you look at that and you can see black men and women on average live less years than our counterparts of white, Hispanic, and Asian. And on the high point of that, you have Asian women who live the longest and Asian men who also live longest at 82, at 86 and 82 respectively. But the biggest thing looking at that whole demographic is that we have males on average living to age 75 and females living to age 80. So I'll let that soak in a little bit. We have men living on average less years on this planet than we do women. And even more disturbing than that, as we look upon the black section, because if you didn't notice, I'm black. You have black men living to age 69 and black women living to age 77. And so black people on average live shorter lives and have a shorter lifespan than any other demographic of people. Now, when it comes to why that is, I didn't necessarily look up exactly what makes this number a lot less than these other counterparts do. But I think it's going to be an interesting thing for me to research over the next couple of years and months. And I know we'll never be able to pinpoint it to exactly what that is. But that is a glaring difference as you look across the scale that black men aren't even living to 70, and you have other demographics such as the Asian living, which on average looks about 13 years longer than black men, and across the board. And you even have Asian women living 9 years longer than black women. Some more information for you guys. We have the men's suicide rate is 4 times higher for men than it is for women. There was a graphic that I ran across on one of the social media platforms where it said already globally today, as we mark it halfway through the year, there are more than, I think it was 444,000 suicides already in 2025. And our average globally annually is around 700,000. So we're not even halfway through the year right now. Once we get to June, we'll be halfway. And we are past the threshold of, which would be 350,000 would be half of 700,000. And so we're well above half the global suicide average that we usually have. And with myself personally, I can honestly say that one of the biggest factors, or just one of the biggest things since the pandemic, is self-isolation. But also, I think it's the amount of time we're spending on our phones and what we're seeing and looking at other people's lives, and also seeing how, in quotation marks, how far ahead they are than our lives, how much their lives look different than ours. Now, looking at these numbers, I can't definitively say exactly what it is. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a licensed professional like a lot of people that I would tell you later in this episode that you need to seek if you're going through some of these things that we talk about. But I think a lot of that has to do, and we can look back to the pandemic, where now there are a lot of people spending more time not leaving the house. There are a lot of people that are on their phones more. They're on the internet. They're watching their favorite streamer or their favorite person, or their favorite celeb and influencer, and we're getting a lot of our information and a lot of what we do from that, rather than connecting with people. So we feel a lot more disconnected, I would say. We feel a lot more disconnected, and a lot of that stuff weighs on us. So I'm not going to sit here and say exactly what it is. I'm just saying my thoughts and my opinions. Once again, I am not a licensed professional, so I'm not sitting here talking as somebody who has went very, very far in school to make this my expertise. But I think this is a good space to talk about it and bring it up, because I know a lot of us see it every day. We see it with our kids or our parents or maybe our spouse or just other people that we know that don't get out and don't get that connection that can possibly help them build that community that they need. So suicide rate 4 times higher for men than for women. And I ran across some very interesting numbers because they broke it down with deaths over the last, and this is a 20-year study. Like I said, if you're looking from it from 2001 to 2022, you have about a large population size to pull from. And looking at these stats and numbers, it lets us know what is the leading cause or what is the leading morality for men in this area. And I'm just going to read them off to you really quick. They have suicide at 28,449. They have motor vehicles at 26,872. They have drug poisoning at 20,068. And they have homicides at 14,517. So, of that, we can see that, and we talk about gun violence, but we pretty much have double the amount of suicides that we do of homicides. And then we also have motor vehicles, which are pretty high, which can be also be motorcycles and also just driving accidents. And then we have drug poisoning. So we have overdoses or drug paraphernalia with whatever that drug of choice might be. This is a very hard and very difficult thing to talk about, especially it's a very slippery slope for me to kind of navigate, but I'm going to go ahead and try to do it. And one of the things I talk about on Wellness Wednesday is just building community, being around some people that you trust, being around people that you feel like you can share some things to, and then also graduating to that where now we're in a day and age where having a therapist or going to therapy or seeing a licensed professional is a lot more accepting than it was 15, 20 years ago. And we need to take full advantage of that because there's a lot of things we can do. But just looking at these numbers and seeing suicide that high in these numbers that I pulled from the American Institute for Boys and Men, who've been studying this for a long time, and then also being able to look at June as a whole on exactly what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish, it speaks volumes. It speaks volumes that there are people that are out here struggling, that there are people that are out here going through things, and they have people that they feel like they can't talk about it to. They have things that they feel like they don't want to share, or spaces that they feel aren't safe enough for them to share things like this. So today I'm going to make that a space for me to do for anybody that's out here listening that can benefit from it. And I personally never had problems or thoughts of ending my life or not wanting to be on this earth anymore because I feel that there's so many people here that I need and so many people here that need me. And it's never been a thought that's crossed my mind. Things have never been that bad for me, myself personally, that I didn't want to be on this earth, that I didn't want to be breathing again. And I think that's very important for me to say because we always think it's really taboo to talk about these things, to really sit here and say I've not or I have had ideations of self-harm or hurting myself or hurting people around me with me not being on this earth anymore. And I think it needs to be more of an open discussion because if I sit here and say I've never had those thoughts or that's never been something I've wanted to do, and I'm talking to somebody that has, I think it makes them less likely to bring up the fact that they have had those thoughts, that they have attempted something like that. So even though I have talked about that it's something that I haven't thought about doing and my responsibilities here on this earth and the people that I would miss and the people that will miss me, I think it's important when you talk about that to also bring up the fact that I can see how some people struggle with this. I can see why some people think that this is an ulterior motive for the pain and the struggle that they're going through. I say that to say because by you creating that space and showing somebody that it's safe and that you are trying to understand or that you can understand why people take that route for what they may be feeling for the pain or the strife or just the hurt that they feel in their heart or the struggle that they're going through, that you want to understand or that you want to be there to support somebody that is so they can continue to be on this earth. I think that alone lets people know that the space is safe for them to share what they really feel and what they really have on their heart. That you are a person that they can tell this to or open up with and not feel judged or not feel like you're looking down upon them as if they are less of a human for having these thoughts or these actions that they've done in the past. And so I think that really helps by us being more receptive of people that are struggling with this, of us being more positive when it comes to us not knowing exactly what they're going through and wanting them to share more if they feel comfortable on exactly why they feel this way. And we never know where those conversations might lead. We never know where that relationship might lead with us doing this. But it's very important for us to begin. And I say begin because we've done a good job initiating it, but to begin and continue to dig deeper into people and letting them know that they do have people on this earth that care about them and that want them here for as long as they can possibly live. And like I just said with those statistics, men are living shorter lives than women are on average, period. And so now you add those numbers in for suicides and poisonings and motor vehicles and homicides, and those numbers are going to be low as long as we continue to deal with those types of things. And so, as we talk about men's health, there are some things that I wrote down that I found across websites where what the goal for Men's Health Month is, for Men's Mental Health Month. And that is to create awareness, prevention, talk about mental health, discuss community engagement, and also the global impact of what having healthy men could be or can do. And I think those are all great things. And so if you ever wondered exactly what is Men's Mental Health Month about, that's what it's about. It's about creating awareness about it, like I just talked about in the statistics. It's about talking about prevention, going and seeing a licensed professional, building up better community that you have people and friends that you can talk to about these problems and situations. It's about mental health, about what that looks like, because up until, like I said, 10 or 20, 15 or 20 years ago, people are like, men are fine. They don't need it. And they're okay. They're just, but men are taking on the brunt of a lot of things, whether you talk about being the head of their household, having to feel that they need to be strong and can't show weakness, or they can't cry, or they can't talk about what they're going through. Community engagement, having those people around you that can see you struggling, that can put an arm around you, that can listen. I think that's the biggest thing when we talk about listening, and then also with the global impact that creates. Now, before we break off and start talking about me and my wellness journey and the things that I'm going to talk about here doing soon, I want to take time to discuss Cam Newton. And so Cam Newton has this show where he has a lot of influential people, a lot of famous people, a lot of celebrities on. And there was this clip the other day that I absolutely loved. And Cam was sitting down talking to an actor. I'm not sure what his last name is, but I think his first name is Woody. And Cam is having this discussion with him, and the actor is talking about in something that happened in his acting class where he had to get up and go sit in a chair in front of his classmates. And one of the things I know about acting is you walk into the room and you're automatically kind of seen as something. Yeah, and most people call it typecasted. But by the way you look, you automatically kind of are molded into looking like a certain character or what we think a certain character is. So one of the things, like I can talk about me in general, like when I have on my glasses and this beard that I have, I've had a lot of people call me a professor. They say you're a professor, you're a teacher. And it's might be somebody else where they're like, okay, you got dark skin, you look really good. Okay, you can play that kind of that that hot dad next door, the guy the young girls crush over, like it's weird stuff like that. But in actuality, it's also it's something that goes on in the industry, and it's something that we kind of all do throughout life. We judge people a little bit. We look at them and we kind of guess what career they might have, how old they might be, if they have any kids, things of that nature. So this actor is talking, and he goes and he sits up in his chair in front of his classmates, and the teacher asked the class, like, hey, who is he to you guys? What does he look like? And there were answers like, a gang member, a thug, all the things that come with, you know that we've experienced as Black people being in a space where if you ask somebody, what does this person do for a living, they might give you the most obscene and horrible typecast of what you are. And he goes on to explain this. And then he said, they turned the chair around and he got to talk to his classmates for a second. And then the teacher asked them again to describe him. And then people started saying, oh, he's nice, he's courteous, he's funny, he's this, he's that. So before he even got to say a word, his classmates had already classified him in a certain area. And then once they were able to talk to him, they were like, yo, this dude is nothing like I thought he would be. Or hey, now that I've seen him speak and interact, he could be great in a role like this or like that. But based upon what they did from their initial judgment, it really, really hurt him. So as he's talking about this and as he's talking about Hollywood, he gets really emotional. And you can see him kind of just he just goes into this shock state of being frozen, and he sits there for a minute, and then he gets up and he leaves out of camera view and he leaves the stage. So as he leaves the stage and he's off camera and he's looks like he might be grabbing some tissue, he might be crying, he might be collecting himself. It sounds like there's a woman in the background that might be comforting him. I don't know if it's his girlfriend or if his wife. I don't exactly know, but you can tell he's taking time to kind of gather himself. Now, the thing I really love about this is that Cam just stays in his seat, stays calm and collective, and he pretty much holds the space. He doesn't sit here and talk and try to fill it in. And he knows he's filming a show, but he doesn't sit there and try to be like, all right, guys, he's just off stage doing this. We're gonna come back to him when he gets here. He just sits there silently. He sits there silently, and anybody that knows about silence, just like I built in there. Anytime we hear silence, we're kind of the time seems to tick by a lot slower. You know, 15 seconds can feel like a minute. 1 minute can feel like five. But Cam builds this silence in, and it's really powerful, but it also shows how listening and not being quick to cover something up with trying to make somebody feel more comfortable or making it a lighter scene or a lighter space to the point where people can laugh and now they're like, oh, that was crazy. Now we can really talk. Okay. But he knew this was a pivotal time in the show. He knew that it was a pivotal time for his guest that he had on because he's really fighting through some painful things that he hasn't yet healed from, that he hasn't yet been able to address in a bigger fashion with possibly a professional. Maybe he has. I don't want to assume, but you can tell that he's reliving this hurtful moment in real time and he's overcome with emotion. So he goes off stage for maybe what seems like a minute and a half. And then finally he comes back and he apologizes. And Cam just says, bro, you're good. Like, you're good. And he wasn't saying you're good, like you're okay. He was saying, like, man, forget all this stuff forget this show that we're doing. Forget this content that I'm going to put out. Like, what you're going through right now is way more important. And what you just did and what you just showed me is way more important than anything we could possibly talk about. And I think those 2 or 3 minutes of that short interview, I haven't gone through and watched the whole interview. I've just seen that clip. But me just seeing that clip, and it's one thing I think that it's hard when you put people in podcasting and interview spaces that don't have the proper you put people in these positions that don't have the proper training of what it's like to really run an interview and to really take care of their guest and to really get the best out of the interview, I would say. And right then in that moment, it seemed like I don't watch Cam Newton show much, but it seemed like Cam knew exactly just what to do in this situation to make his guest feel comfortable, to not overstep his boundary and make the interview continue and to keep going. And I really thought that that was really important. And those that know, I don't like Cam Newton. I don't like how he dresses. I don't like his hats. I don't like his clothing. It's a bigger reason from that because they beat us in the national championship back in 2011. So if it wasn't for Cam Newton, I would be able to call myself a national championship. I'm pretty dang sure. But since we had to run into Cam Newton and the Auburn Tigers and lose by 3 on a last second field goal, Cam Newton has a very special place in my heart, which is pretty much in hell. Excuse my language. But knowing that, but just seeing this gesture from him and seeing him, become softer for his guest and really just letting him know, yo, bro, you're good. You're good, man. You walking off this stage or you taking up those 2 or 3 minutes that you needed to take to reset and to really go through your feelings. It's the least I owe you as the host of this show. So I'm gonna post that, I'll put that in the show notes so you guys can kind of see it and click on it if you haven't seen it yet. But it's such a powerful moment. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about community, when I talk about men taking care of men and giving them a space that they're able to do that and that they're able to feel comfortable after that, and not embarrassed, and not saying, man, I just messed up Cam Newton's show. Like, what am I gonna do? Like, man, I looked like a real sucker. I looked soft on there for crying and having to leave and recollect myself. Nah, bro, that's the space to do it. This is the space to come and be able to do that. And so, not saying it has to be on a big platform like that, not saying that it has to be visually that you see somebody do that, but those are the examples that we can see as men that let us know that, all right, it's okay to show emotion. There are other people becoming overwhelmed by stuff that's happening to them. There are people that haven't healed from a certain situation and they're still hurting from it, like I'm hurting from a different situation. And so I really appreciate Cam for giving us that sneak peek into seeing that from a time that was vulnerability and showed somebody being vulnerable and somebody holding the space and making sure that space was safe for them to act and to do exactly what they wanted to do in that moment. So, whew, man, that was a lot. So I appreciate you guys sticking with me and just talking about that because I felt like it was really on my heart to talk about it because when I saw it, I usually don't click on Cam stuff, but when I saw it, I said, man, this is going to be powerful for a lot of people out there for knowing what to do in a situation like this. And so as we double back, I like to use Wednesdays as Wellness Wednesdays. And I spoke about what that looks like for me, but mostly I wanted to talk about my personal journey with mental health, with men's health. And I've always been a football player, always been an athlete. So for me, health has not really been a problem. Being in shape, going to doctor's appointments, making sure that my blood work is good, my heart's good, my mind is okay for the most part. I haven't done a great job with that, but we've always had psychologists around our team and clinical professionals. But I wanted to talk about me returning to therapy. And this week marks the week that I'll be going to my first therapy session that I've been to, I think, since 2000 or no, I'm sorry, not 2000, 2020 or 2021 is when I had my last therapist. We had a couple sessions, but I ended up having to leave because this woman was eating. I was on a telehealth with her, and I saw that she was like eating her lunch while we were sitting down and talking about some really deep stuff. And it just struck a chord with me. And not to say I've never recovered. Okay, we're being honest here. I haven't recovered because I went through a lot to find her, and we had a couple sessions, and I told her some stuff, and then for me to see her eating during a session, I was just like, this is totally not professional. And me wanting to be a psychologist and down the road, and even with me meeting with clients like I do now for coaching, I would never sit there in front of them and eat. Even if I hadn't eaten that whole day, like that is not the time during my session to sit here and munch on something. And it wasn't just like a snack. Let me be clear. It wasn't just a couple pieces of trail mix, which trail mix are nasty and horrible. It was really a full on, like, I'm eating a bite of a sandwich here. I'm grabbing some chips here. I'm taking a swig of my drink over here. And so I'm noticing all this stuff while I'm talking to her. And so I say that to say, for a long time, I was not afraid to run into a situation like this, but finding a therapist is like dating, is like finding the right barber. When you're dating, there's sometimes your dating pool has to be, you're taking somebody out, you're sitting down, you're getting to know them. And it might be 5, 10, 15, 20 dates before you find somebody that you really want to date, somebody that you want to be your girlfriend and later on your wife. But the same thing with barbers. Sometimes we go to a barber and we sit down in a chair and their service isn't what we expected. The haircut that I got wasn't top notch or top level. So now I have to search for somebody else. But we're also not trying to just jump into 10, 15, 20 chairs to find the right barber. We would rather sit on the sideline and get a recommendation for somebody or see somebody with a very nice haircut and say, hey, man, who's your barber? Like, I might need to check him out. And so that's what I tell people when it comes to therapy or finding a clinical professional, that it's like dating, that you got to do your research. You got to go to their website. You got to look at their background. For me, I like to work with people that have worked with athletes, people that have worked with high performing individuals, because I have a certain mindset. And so sometimes that they can talk to me and be like, hey, Drew, you're way too focused on what you're doing right now. You're way too hard on yourself. Why don't you pull back a little bit and have some grace with yourself? Because athletes, we're so dogged in what we do sometimes because that's how we've been programmed. We play a game, we win, we celebrate that night or we enjoy it. Then the next day, hey, okay, that win's behind us. Now we got to focus on the win for next week. But my main reason to get back into therapy, just to let people know, is that I lost my dad this time last year in June to cancer. And he had been fighting cancer for the better part of 20 years. He went in for surgery around, I think it was on September 11th of 2000 when the planes hit the Trade Center. And so he's been fighting and battling for that long. And I've lost two father figures in my life. My pops, who coached me in baseball, I lost him a couple years ago to congestive heart failure when I was the director of player development at UCLA. My phone was getting blowed up, and I got calls from my mom's, my cousin, my little brother, and my dad or my pops that passed away in his sleep. And so the two father figures, the two fathers that I've had in my life, I've both lost over the last 6 or 7 years. And this upcoming June or this upcoming Father's Day for next Sunday will be my first Father's Day without a father. And so I think it is the most opportune time right now to jump back into therapy because there's some things that I haven't addressed from my father passing away last year because we sat down as a family and we talked about some things and we got some new information that we didn't know before. But we got all this information and now we have this information and now we've just lost this person. So how do we really unpack what we've just learned and the experience that we had growing up as kids in our family dynamic? And that was the biggest part to me. So we talk about losing my dad last year to cancer. We got to spend our last Father's Day with him last year. I wasn't in Denver, but I got to call him, and that was my last time talking to him on Father's Day. So we lost him in June, buried him in July, and my dad was a very just, hey, I don't want much stuff at my funeral. Just do this and bury me and write this on my tombstone, and we're good. And so knowing that I have that pent up, the death of him last year, coming up on this 1 year anniversary of his death, then also not soon after he passed away, I got baptized. And so that would be my faith journey. So I took a big leap to get closer to Jesus, closer to the Lord, closer to my faith, which has been a big push from a lot of people around me and from my girlfriend who's been looking for that for a long time. I've been going to church, I've been steady in my Bible, but I was afraid to take that leap because I said, hey, I know I'm not perfect. And your walk with God or being baptized isn't about being perfect. It's about knowing who you want to be your Lord and Savior. It's about knowing the path that you want to walk on and the morals and scruples that you want to live and have as far as what being a Christian looks like. And so, with the whole process of my dad passing away and then getting baptized, and I just felt like it was the right time. I felt like I had a heavy heart. I felt like I needed a little bit more clarity, but I also felt like I was ready. And one thing around that time is our pastor said this exact same thing. He said, you know, being baptized or being a follower of Christ isn't about being perfect. And he just, there's certain sermons when you go to church that just speak right to you. And this is one of those sermons. And the whole time I was thinking I needed to be perfect, but I just needed to take this leap of faith. And that's what the pastor helped me realize during this time is that I'm never going to be perfect. There's only one perfect person that walked this earth. But me getting baptized is the first step in my faith journey to grow it and to really figure out what I'm trying to do and to be that example for these other people and these other young people that are caught between their faith and exactly what they want that to look like. So now, every time we go or see baptisms at church, I get really emotional because you see how happy people are to accept God and Jesus as their Lord. And you hear people and then you see them and they're happy, they're smiling, they're cheering, their hands are in the air. They got people there that are supporting them to come to their baptism, and there are tears and there's all this different stuff. So this past weekend, I went with my girlfriend and her family to this church called Believe LA. And we're there, and it's a very small church. It's in this parking lot, but you can tell there's a lot of faith, and they have a lot of just support and love from their congregation and the people that go there. And their praise and worship was awesome. And it just so happened on the same day they're doing baptisms. And so as we're sitting there for the church service, the sermon was great, the praise and worship was great, and they get to these times where they start doing baptisms at the end, and I just get really emotional. And for fellas out there, man, make sure those tear ducts work, man. It's make sure they work, make sure they're operating the right way they need to. And I say that like crying is a good thing. It's letting out some things that you've been holding or that have been pent up. And as we're sitting there and we're watching baptisms and the baptism, it was only supposed to last a certain length of time, but they ended up going longer because there are some certain people that had already identified that this was the day they were getting baptized. But as people saw other people getting baptized, there were other people that wanted to get baptized that said, "Hey, can I do it today?" And the church being the church is like, of course, like we will go however long we need to go in order to get everybody who's here that wants to get baptized today baptized. And so you see people going up and volunteers taking them back to the bathroom to get them changed into a shirt, into some other clothes for them to get dunked into the tank. And I just start getting really emotional during the last part of this ceremony. And I think a little bit was thinking about Father's Day and my dad and how it's creeping up and he won't be here and I won't have that person to call. I think it was me, about to start my first therapy session that next week. I think it was me reliving myself getting baptized this time last year and what that meant. It was the joy from seeing so many other people so happy to get baptized. And there were everybody from young kids at the age of 5 or 6. And there were some, I'm not going to put no age on them. There were some people that looked like they were as old as in their 50s or 60s that saw that it's never too late to accept Jesus into your life as your Lord and Savior. And so I think it was an amalgamation of things that really kind of got me going. And I was just sitting there listening to the praise and worship, and my eyes started to water up. And I had on my glasses, so I blinked, and the tears start rolling down and get into my beard. And I'm like, all right, wiped them away. I'm just sitting there, and I'm just being present. I'm not trying to stop the tears. I'm not trying to make the tears continue to flow. They just keep coming in these segments. And I take off my glasses, and I just look up to the sky, and I just sit there for a little longer. Finally, it feels like the moment passed. Then I'm sitting there again and the waterworks start again. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But there's a part of me I'm not embarrassed. I'm not trying to say I don't need anybody to see me crying. Like I'm fine. It was a very emotional time for me. It was a very emotional point. My eyes might start watering now just talking about it. So those of you on this podcast, you can't see me, but if you want to see me, you got to go on YouTube. And it just felt like the right thing to be doing. It felt like I was in the right space. It felt like I was letting off a weight of my shoulders that I've been carrying for a long time. That reliving the baptism, being happy for myself, being happy for other people, sitting there with people that I love, being brought to this new church to hear this message and to see these baptisms on this random Sunday in June. And I really felt free. I felt free. I felt good. I felt relieved. I felt all these different emotions, but those tears leaving me, and it was a lot of tears. I was probably crying for about 5 or 10 minutes and just sitting down and being present, just looking at everyone that was happy around me. So when I talk about wellness, that's wellness. Wellness is being able to express yourself emotionally how you want to in that moment, and having the people around you that can see that and that know necessarily not to ask, "Hey, are you okay? Are you all right?" But they just let you be for a little while. They let you experience. They see that they're not tears of sadness or anger or contentment, I guess you can say, but that they're tears nonetheless, and that you look to be fine while you're sitting there. And so if you haven't cried in a while as a man, as a person, really look into things. Not saying that you need to cry, because I'm one of the people like, I'm not saying that I need to cry in order to move on or feel well or to get some things out that have been kind of packed in there. But I do think crying is a release for us to get some things out. Maybe it's holding up some stress for the day. Maybe an interaction that we've been holding on to. Maybe a failed relationship that we just haven't quite let go yet. And so I think by crying, we're able to release some things in a good way. And with us releasing those things, now we're able to fill up with more. with more good things, I would say, and we can carry those around for us. So if you're listening to this and you have never been to therapy or you've never seen a licensed professional, my advice is to seek one out, to really make it your next goal that you have for this month or this summer is to possibly get a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a licensed professional, a counselor to sit down and talk with somebody about life, your day to day. It doesn't have to be the deep stuff yet. You can start with surface level, but maybe your work, your duties or your job as a husband or a father. If you're an athlete, about your performance, how you feel, what is it like balancing being a student athlete with school and your sport? If you're a mother and you feel overcome with things like taking care of the kids and taking care of your husband and working a job and finding time for yourself for self-care, I would definitely tell everyone that to really make that concerted effort to find a licensed professional that you can meet with once a month, every other week, weekly. And one of the good things I was going to talk about is that sometimes your employer takes care of some of this. Your EAP, your employer assistance program, a lot of places have them. That's where I'm going through to get my therapy. The NFL has this really great benefit where we can see up to 8 times a licensed professional on a certain pain point or a certain area. And so the therapy is ongoing, but if the area switches, I can move into a new 8 sessions that will allow me to continue to work with this therapist as long as they cover or that those areas of therapy are in their wheelhouse. So my next therapy sessions are going to consist of grief. So these 8 sessions will be probably talking about grief and how I'm recovering from it. And then after we wrap these up, maybe my next sessions talk about anxiety. And then after we finish those 8 sessions, maybe those next 8 or talk about, anger or health or eating or something like that. I don't know. But what I'm saying is there are small loopholes that you guys can find that you guys can use to benefit you. So if your insurance won't cover it, or if you think me paying out of pocket or the price that I have to pay is too much, my question to you is how much is your mental health worth? How much is your health worth? Can you put a price on your health? Can you put a price on you living as long as you can to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor, to see your kids grow up, to see your grandbabies grow up, to see your great great grandbabies grow up, to grow old with your husband or your wife or your spouse? My thing is, how much is that stuff worth to you? Is it worth, $200 a session to live for 20, 30 more years? Is it worth being able to heal from a past trauma that's going to allow you to be a better husband, wife, son, daughter, athlete, cousin, dad? I think I said father, dad, mom. I think I said both of those. But we have to really stop putting a price on what our health is worth. And we have to take those leaps of faith. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were like, they brought up all this emotional stuff from their childhood and from what they're experiencing now with things that they're going through with, their baby mama. And they were like, yeah, I know I should go to therapy, but man, forget all that. And I made it a point to stop him and say, nah, don't forget all that. You talked about everything you're going through, and yet you want to gloss over it like it's okay and you're gonna get through it on your own. No, we need somebody to help us. Some things we can't do alone. These other things we're talking about, we can't do it alone. So we need to stop acting like it's just something that's just going to stop hurting us one day because it's not. It's going to be there and it's going to show up at the most random time when it is the worst for us. So I hope everyone hears this and I hope people forward this to somebody that really needs it, somebody that you know is going through something, somebody that you know is going to be able to be helped by these words that I said today. Someone who's going to take that leap and go search for a therapist, a psychologist, a clinical professional, a counselor, somebody that's going to sit here and try to build better and in a wider net of community with people that care about them. So I hope with me being vulnerable on this episode is going to help a lot of other people be vulnerable too. I hope you take the time to find a clinical professional that is right for you, that can help you heal and push past some trauma and some pain that you've experienced in your life. And if this episode helped you in any way, please reach out and let me know so. You can reach out at drewjaydavis.com. Click on the contact page and it'll allow you to send a message to me that I will see. And please just fill out that form. It'll come right to me. I would love to be able to talk about these on the show later in the month, and create an episode about it. But if anything I've said have helped you, if you're going through any of the similar things that I'm going through, you want to reach out, you've lost a parent, a friend, if you've been going through some things, some transition, some hurtful moments in your life that you feel comfortable talking about and telling me, please, please, please don't hesitate to write in, and it'll be totally confidential. Don't sit here. I'm not going to say, "Oh, John Doe from Cleveland writes in and he says," no, that's not what the show's for. It's to let people know that there are similar people going through and pushing through and going through similar things that they are, and that hopefully it'll help them. But I hope this show and this episode just gives you a glimpse, an even deeper glimpse into who I am as a man, the things I'm going through, the things I've been through, the things that I'm trying to help other people with. And I just hope that there are people that see value in this show and what I'm building and the space that I'm creating for other people to come in, to get their cup filled and to go back out in the world and be the best that they can possibly be. So once again, I love and I love and I love and I appreciate everybody that has been liking and subscribing and following and listening to these episodes. And I greatly appreciate every single one of you. And I hope that you guys continue to fight, continue to push through, and continue to admit when you need some help. I'm Uncle Drew, and we'll talk to you soon. Stay healthy.